Sometimes, a headline hits like a punch to the gut. You know, the kind of the ones that stop time, make you sit up a little straighter, and question everything you thought you knew. The Black Dahlia mystery solved. It's not just a headline. It's a twist in a story that's haunted us for over 75 years. The kind of revelation that, when it lands, shakes you to the core. You're sitting there, coffee in hand, and for a moment, everything stops. You read it again, just to make sure you didn't miss anything. And then the weight of it sinks in. This isn't some random headline. This is the twist. The final truth that's been hidden for decades, and it's darker than anything we ever imagined. For 75 years, the murder of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, sat like a splinter in the American psyche. We all knew the story. We all had theories, even if we didn't know it. Was it the jealous lover? The disgraced doctor? The Hollywood mogul? We obsessed over it. We consumed it. But it was always the same, unsolved, unanswered. And then, one day, we were hit with a bombshell. The mystery was finally solved. But here's the thing. What's shocking isn't just who did it. It's what the truth says about us. About the people who were supposed to protect us, who were supposed to care. It's not just the fact that it took so long to solve. It could have been solved much earlier, if only the people in power had been brave enough to confront the truth. The case wasn't buried by time. It was buried by politics, fear, and the reputations of those who should have cared. And now, with the lid finally off, the smell isn't just one of rot and decay. It's the scent of something much worse: corruption, cowardice, and complicity. The Black Dahlia case has always been more than just a tragic death. It's been a reflection of post-war America, the city of dreams, bursting with ambition and secrets. But now, after all these years, the mirror has shattered. The image that's staring back isn't a glamorous myth. It's worse. The truth doesn't cleanse, it contaminates. And now that it's out, there's no turning back. So, where do we start? How did we get here, to this chilling moment of revelation? Let's take a step back and go to the beginning. Los Angeles, January 1947. Post-war America was brimming with optimism, but beneath the surface, there was a darker, more violent side to the city of angels. LA wasn't just palm trees and Hollywood glam. It was a city of broken dreams, of hidden crimes. And it was in this unforgiving, desperate place that Elizabeth Short's body was found mutilated, posed, discarded like trash in a vacant lot near Leimert Park. The crime was so brutal, so theatrical, it grabbed the nation's attention. It wasn't just a murder, it was a spectacle. The kind of twisted, dark story you couldn't ignore. Elizabeth Short, only 22, became more than just a victim. She became the Black Dahlia, a symbol, a myth, and that myth spread, growing in power with every passing year. The LAP was under enormous pressure to solve it. Over 150 suspects were interviewed. Dozens of confessions, most of them false. The case stalled. Evidence was lost. The press ran wild, writing wild theories and handing out new suspects like candy. But nothing stuck. Nothing moved forward. For decades, the theories piled up. Some thought they knew who did it, others how it was done. Everyone from armchair detectives to best-selling authors tried to crack it. But in the end, it wasn't about who killed Elizabeth Short. It was about the mystery, the not knowing, the obsession that kept it alive long after the headlines had faded. The Black Dahlia became a fixture in American pop culture. Books, movies, TV shows, podcasts, you name it. But what got lost in all of it? The woman herself. Elizabeth Short wasn't a symbol or a puzzle to solve. She was a person. A daughter, a sister, a woman with hopes and fears. But the world treated her as a mystery to be cracked wide open. Her life wasn't just dissected, it was consumed. And with it, the mystery of her death became a symbol of everything wrong with a city that built itself on reinvention. The revelation didn't come with a flash of cameras or a grand speech. It didn't happen at a press conference. It started quietly as a whisper, buried in a long investigative report by a Los Angeles journalist who had uncovered a long-forgotten set of FBI documents. But that whisper was enough. The case wasn't cold anymore. It was solved. And the man who had been the murderer wasn't some nameless drifter or unknown criminal. No, he was someone with power, with connections. Someone who had worked inside the medical community, had ties to law enforcement, even to Hollywood. He was someone who had been protected for decades, not because he was loved, but because exposing him would have brought down too many others. The truth wasn't revealed in a moment of clarity. It was uncovered painstakingly over time, through old files, medical photographs, and transcripts. A fingerprint long ignored, tested again with new technology. The truth was there, waiting. And now that it's finally come to light, there's no turning back. The wound, long ignored, is now open, raw, and festering. We thought we knew the story. We thought we knew who was behind it. But the truth is it's much darker than we ever imagined. And now, with it, comes a new kind of revelation. Not just about a crime, but about the world that allowed it to happen. The match wasn't just suggestive. It was conclusive. The killer was someone you wouldn't expect, a respected surgeon, now long dead, with a documented history of erratic behavior, complaints from staff, and connections to criminal elements in mid-century Los Angeles. What's even more chilling is that Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, had crossed paths with him weeks before her murder, but not in the way the tabloids had long suggested. She had met him through a mutual acquaintance, someone tied to an underground medical clinic that operated beyond the bounds of law and ethics. This wasn't the work of a disturbed individual acting alone. The documents pointed to something darker, a web of silence. Several officers from the original investigation had been guided by higher-ups to avoid pursuing certain leads. Notes passed between departments, vague warnings scribbled in margins of reports, and even requests to destroy evidence that could damage reputations. One particularly haunting memo showed an officer pleading to continue pursuing the surgical lead, only to be reassigned days later. When confronted with these revelations, the current LAP leadership didn't deny the weight of the evidence. Instead, they held a somber, subdued briefing. They named the killer. They admitted their failures. Words like regret, disgrace, and accountability were used, but it was clear. This wasn't a moment of justice. It was an uncomfortable reckoning. The devastating truth wasn't just that the case could have been solved years ago. It was that it was never meant to be solved, at least not publicly. For decades, key figures had decided that protecting their institutions mattered more than exposing the truth. The silence wasn't due to ignorance, it was deliberate. The public reaction was swift and divided. Some felt a sense of relief that the mystery was finally put to rest. For others, it was like learning that their favorite storybook had an alternate ending, one much darker, far more corrupt. The Black Dahlia, once a glamorous noir mystery, had been replaced by a much colder, clinical reality. The system had failed, and the cover-up lasted longer than the crime itself. Survivors and descendants of those involved began to step forward. Some apologized, some were furious, others simply wept. A granddaughter of one of the original detectives shared in a radio interview, "He always came home quiet. He drank a lot. I used to think it was just the job. But now I think he carried this with him." Hollywood, forever obsessed with the Dahlia myth, stayed mostly silent, at least initially. The numerous films and TV shows that had dramatized the case painted it in so many noir shades that the real truth felt almost too plain to be dramatized. There was no grand chase, no poetic justice, just a trail of paperwork, a fingerprint, and a long silence broken far too late. What remained was discomfort. People craved closure, but the truth didn't feel like closure. It felt like exposure that laid bare not just the individuals involved, but the systems that allowed it to happen. The question wasn't, why did he do it? It was, why did no one stop him? The revelation didn't make Elizabeth Short's death easier to understand. It made it harder. The veil of mystery was torn away, but beneath it was something much worse, as a landscape of institutional protection, moral shortcuts, and a silent agreement to look the other way when the truth was too costly to uncover. So yes, the Black Dahlia mystery was solved. but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an overdue confession. And for many, that's what made it hurt the most. Because when a truth this dark is finally brought into the light, what comes next isn't celebrating its consequences. Not just for the people directly involved, but for the systems that enabled it. The mystery is gone, but what replaces it? What do we do with a truth that indicates not just one man, but an entire culture of silence? Uncovering the truth behind the Black Dahlia case was one thing. But discovering everything that helped keep it buried, that was something else entirely. As the details of the case settled into the public consciousness, something strange happened. People didn't feel satisfied. They didn't feel the relief they had expected. Instead, they felt sick, not because the murder was gruesome, it always had been, but because the truth didn't offer the closure people had hoped for. Instead, it opened a door no one wanted to walk through. The murder itself was horrifying, no question. But the cover-up, that was something far worse. It wasn't driven by rage or madness, it was cold, calculated, and deliberate. The realization that respected officials had shelved evidence, moved detectives off the case, and even ignored critical leads shattered something that many people held dear, an unspoken trust. People like to believe that, despite its flaws, the system tries to do the right thing. This case proved that wasn't always the case. In the face of political ambitions, public image concerns, and institutional self-preservation, justice was merely optional. What followed was a collective moral hangover. There were editorials, op-eds, think pieces, and televised discussions. Words like institutional failure, misconduct, and structural rot became part of the national conversation. The public began to ask, were other cases from the same era mishandled too? Who else slipped through the cracks? Because someone thought protecting a reputation mattered more than seeking justice. Former officers were named publicly, many of them long dead and unable to defend themselves. Their families were blindsided. Some were angry, others apologetic. Old colleagues spoke anonymously, admitting that they had their suspicions back then but didn't push for answers, afraid it might ruin their careers. One retired officer, now in his 90s, gave a phone interview to a local news station. His voice trembled as he recalled, "We weren't just told to back off. We were warned. We all got quiet." The shockwaves didn't stop at the LAPD. Several federal agencies were implicated in the documents, including names of officials who had received early reports but chose not to act. Internal investigations were launched. But while many of the individuals involved were gone, the culture they helped shape was still very much alive. The culture of protecting power, avoiding scandal, and sacrificing accountability had left a lasting imprint. The past wasn't just something to study, it was a mirror, reflecting the present in a way no one had anticipated. The most painful part wasn't just the perpetrators of silence. It was how many people were complicit simply by staying quiet. The journalists who buried the leads, the detectives who looked the other way, the city leaders who knew enough to ask questions but chose not to. No one wanted to admit they had played a role in letting Elizabeth's short story become myth rather than justice. The public's relationship with the case changed overnight. For years, it had been a noir fantasy, wrapped in vintage glamour and shadowy speculation. Books, podcasts, documentaries, and dramatizations had fed the obsession. But suddenly none of it felt appropriate. The mystique was gone, and in its place was something raw, uncomfortable, and unsettling. The Black Dahlia wasn't just a mystery anymore. She had become a symbol of what happens when a society turns a woman's death into a story, instead of a crime worth solving. Not everyone took the news well. Some flat out refused to believe it. Conspiracy theories quickly sprouted, challenging the official narrative. Social media buzzed with debates. Were the documents forged? Was the fingerprint planted? Was the confession coerced after death? After so many years of myth, the truth was hard to believe, as though people preferred the shadows to the harshness of the light. Yet, there were others who felt a kind of relief. Historians, advocates, even casual followers of the case finally had an answer. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. For Elizabeth Short's surviving family, there was no celebration, just silence. A niece released a brief statement. "Thank you to those who never stopped looking. We are grateful, but our grief has no expiration date." The most sobering realization in the aftermath wasn't just that the crime had passed, it was that the damage hadn't. The murder didn't just take one life, it fractured trust. It showed just how easy it was for the truth to be buried, not because it was unknowable, but because it was inconvenient. Now that the truth was out in the open, the question was no longer, who caused the Black Dahlia? It was, what else have we chosen not to see? The media's role in all of this is impossible to ignore. The press didn't just cover the Black Dahlia case, it helped create it. From the moment Elizabeth Short's body was discovered in that vacant lot, the press pounced on the story with the kind of frenzy usually reserved for movie stars and political scandals. But this wasn't just news, it was an opportunity. In 1947, newspapers were fighting for attention in an increasingly competitive market, and a murder this brutal, mysterious, and photogenic was a dream come true for editors. The Black Dahlia wasn't just a victim, she became a headline, a brand, a myth. It started with the name. Elizabeth Short had barely been identified before reporters started calling her the Black Dahlia, a nickname inspired by her dark clothing and a film noir that was playing in theaters at the time. That one poetic twist transformed her from a murder victim into a mystery worth selling. Front pages plastered photos of her in posed studio shots, casting her as a seductive starlet. Articles dissected her love life, her mental health, her aspirations. Some painted her as a tragic beauty. Others hinted at her moral failings. But all of it, every headline, every story focused on her image, her identity, rather than on finding her killer. And the press didn't just report on the case, they interfered with it.